I made 200 of these for the Hukilau.
My friend Al carved this little tiki. It's a necklace pendant, and he asked me to make 200 copies in resin. Stick around. In this video, I'll show you how I did it. The first thing I did was make a silicone rubber mold from Al's original wooden carving. I made 10 castings from the original mold, and these are the castings that are going to be used to make the production tool. I added some red pigment to the resin. That way the castings are a little bit easier for you guys to see on camera. When they're pure white, they get really washed out. It's hard to expose them right. Anyway, they're looking good. I got 10 good castings, very clean, and we're going to mold these kids up to make the production cavities. So, on to the next step. I have this production case that I have already made, and now all we have to do is stand up our little guys in the case in a nice little row and get them evenly spaced in there so they make the right, it's going to be about to there on the other end. So let's get them evenly spaced in there. Now I'm going to give you guys the sweetened condensed version of this process, because what I actually have to do is I have to actually glue each one of these pieces down to the base with sticky wax. And it's quite a crafty little project. I take my time, I get the spacing just exactly right, and I get them glued in there securely, but they can't be touching. See, if they touch like that or like that, that's no bueno. They have to be really well spaced. So I take my time and I do it that way. And once they're all in there, let's just all pretend that that looks good. They're not quite spaced out. So, like I said, this is the shortened version of this process. Okay, so once you have them all lined up in there, we're going to pretend they're all lined up and spaced out perfecto and glued in tight. Then I can go ahead and put the ends onto the mold case like that. And everything is held together with melted wax. I just melt everything with heat gun. Then I can put the sides on, and the whole thing's held together with blue painter's tape, which is all you need, strong enough and works. All right, so I have the mold case assembled and all the pieces are in there. Once the thing is assembled like this, I don't like to move it around much because frankly it's pretty fragile. And the reason that it's fragile is that it has to hold together, it has to not leak, has to keep everything in position while the rubber gets poured around it. But at the same time, when it's time to take it apart, I have to be able to get the thing apart easily. The castings have to separate easily from the case. So, you know, your adhesive is doing two different jobs at once. One is to keep everything together, and one is to release easily when it's time to take the whole thing apart. So now it's a simple matter of filling this up with rubber and then cutting the pieces free, and now we've got a tool to use. Okay, here is our production mold. As you can see, it has 10 cavities, or 10 parts that this mold will make. So the trick to assembling the mold to make it ready for casting is to make sure, as you can see, all the parting lines, well, you want all those to close up and go away and become as invisible as you can make them. When they look like that, they're going to make a really clean, tight casting with a small parting line. So the trick to that is to put on our rubber bands, lots of rubber bands, evenly over the whole mold, because what you want is you want to close the mold, but you don't want to put so much pressure on it. Like you wouldn't use big, strong, heavy rubber bands because it puts too much pressure, it squeezes too hard, and that deforms the mold. And while it might not be easy to tell looking at the casting that they're slightly misshapen, what it will do is it will cause the parting lines to open. And that means you will get a tremendous amount of flash around each casting. And the whole trick to this is to get as little flash as possible. For instance, here's a casting with very minimal flash. You can see, there's some, but really it's pretty clean, not too bad. Whereas this casting is a lot worse. Still, this is not terrible. I mean, I can work with this. This stuff comes off pretty easily, but the whole game is to not have this be really bad, because then it's a lot of work to clean off. And when you have to make a couple hundred of something, the last thing you want to do is have to, sand and scrape and clean a lot of stuff. I make a carriage for each production mold that it sets in, and that's just to make the mold easier to handle. The less you handle it, the less likely the mold parts are, the more mold sections are to come apart. And again, it's all about keeping those parting lines closed so I can handle it with this tray, and that makes it a lot safer for me. I get less resin on my hands, and I don't deform the molds. Just going over them, checking, make sure, come on, they got to be nice and together. Beautiful. Okay, so I metered out the resin. The resin's a two-part system. The A side, which is the hardener kind of side, and the resiny kind of side is the B side. It's got the brown color in it to give the light brown color. You notice how dark brown the color is in the cup, and it comes out a lot lighter when it's cast. Anyway, so now what we're going to do is dump the two together and mark it, set, go. And it's off to the races. You got to mix it really thoroughly, but you don't have all day. So you want to get it done quick. Stuff sets up pretty fast. It's going to be out of the mold inside of 20 minutes, cured, hardened. Now, it's not going to reach its final hardness in 20 minutes. It's going to reach its final hardness after, I think, something like 24 hours, actually. But we don't care, because it's going to be hard enough to demold, and that's all we need. So what I typically do is I pour them, but I don't pour them all the way to the top on the first, because I want to pour them as quickly as I can. So I get the most liquidy resin into the cavity. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of tip them and jiggle them so that maybe any other bubbles that might be lodged in there come up. But the real work of debubbling the resin is going to be done by the pressure pot. I'm going to put this mold under compressed air pressure, and that is going to be the thing that makes sure that we crush out all of the bubbles. We want to make sure that every one of these molds is topped off. This might be a little too much topping over here. Break that down a little bit so that I don't have too big of bridges between them. And the only reason you don't want that is you would like these to come out of the mold with as little flash as possible. But at the same time, you want to make sure that you've over poured them so that there's plenty to trim off afterwards. Okay, let's load these into the tank. Beautiful. Now it'll cook for about 20 minutes and then we'll pull it out. All right. Through the magic of YouTube, 20 minutes have passed and they're ready to come out of the mold. When I said earlier that they were cooking, they're not cooking. There's no heat involved. It's just pressure. I just said cooking. Don't pay any attention to what I say. Let's pull these things out and see how they look. Shut off the air supply and let the air out of the tank. I have full confidence that they're going to look fantastic, but you never know. All right. Let's see. Oh, look at that thing living in its little cave. Very nice. That's the pressure pot. Here we go. Let's come out. No excuses for you. All right, we'll waltz this over to where we're going to demold it. There are times when the overpour or the overflow is a little much, and sometimes it's helpful to just slide a tool in there and pop it out of there, break it. Oftentimes you don't need to use a tool to break the bridge between them, but it can be useful. Okay, so let's take the rubber bands off. I take them off one at a time because if I don't, they get all tangled up, and they're so cheap, it's not worth the time to try to sit there and detangle them. It's just easier to do it this way. Okay, let's pop. Let us pop. Now see, here's one I did not take apart. There we go. All right, beautiful. All right. Let's get these kids out. They're coming out good. All right, so that's 10 more done. Beautiful. So then the next thing I would do is just go through and see if I can clean out any flashing that's still stuck in the molds. A little bit of extra squeeze out from each mold half. If they're allowed to build up, then they'll just cause more and more problems and more cleanup down the line. So it's a good idea to go through and take them out. They're not bad if you keep after them. But see down in there, that would just build up into a bigger one in the next mold cycle, so it's worth it to get it out of there. So we try to keep the molds pretty clean. They're looking good. Looking nice. Okay. Done. Good. We'll put him back together in a minute and get the next cycle started. Off to the next station. Now I wanted to show you the router station. This is where we trim the bottoms of the base of the figure nice and flat. It's just a little home-built router table, and with absolutely zero dust collection currently attached to it. So I'm making a nice little mountain of chips. That's about 150 castings worth of chips. Anyway, and I made this handy dandy little jig that positions the pieces in it. And you will see that in operation here momentarily. But it's very effective, and I'll show you how I work it. The first step in cleaning the bases is to just knock off the extra flashing around the base, which is just, it just literally just breaks right off. Very easy and quick. No worries. Not hard to do. So we just start by breaking it off like that. That being done, we're all set. Let's turn that machine on. Okay, at this machine, what we're looking to do is, got a little bit of run out. Don't you think? Kind of jury rigged my flatter wheel to the lathe. It's not exactly a precision tool, but it does its job, and its job is not only to take the flash off, which it does a great job, but also to kind of make the corners on the base. Since we just machined them on the router, they're pretty sharp. So it's a good idea to take them off. And this process goes by really fast. Compared to doing this by hand, this would be a long process. So this very low-tech flatter wheel system, you know, these wheels, sanding wheels, flap wheels, are different than a normal flap wheel in that they're individual fingers of, I'll show you what I'm talking about. I really like these wheels because they're individual, like hairs. They're not flaps. It's way better for this kind of job, way better for sanding irregular things. All right, on we go. Here's a nice hairy boy. Pops the hairs right off. I do like these flatter wheels. Another big advantage that they have is that they're real gentle on the plastic. This wheel, this particular wheel, is pretty well worn. It's old. And I save them. It wouldn't do that much damage to hardwoods, but I save them because they're really good for plastics. They don't grind off. You know, the grain doesn't go all the way through. The grain is just a surface effect in this cast plastic, and you grind it off. It's a smooth plastic underneath. So you'd want something that takes the hairs off, but won't pull the detail out of the casting. And so it's just perfect for this. I like it. And the other thing is too, if I bump into the wheel, that's not going to hurt me. Now, don't do that with brand new 80 grit or 60 grit sandpaper. It would burn you up. The RPMs are really low. The wheel is old. The paper's worn. Perfect combination for cleaning plastic. It's not so dangerous. Not as likely to pick this up and fling it across a shop as like a big grinding wheel or a big sanding wheel will do. Like my 20-inch sander will throw a large piece of wood across the shop if you're not careful with it. You do something stupid. So that's a little tiny bit less dangerous than a tool like that. Anyway, really like it. It's working good, and we're getting the job done. That's what I like to see. Last one of this batch. One thing is, I don't like this angle. I did this because I'm talking to you guys, but I am getting this stuff flung in my face. All the little bits are getting flying into my face. I'm probably getting all over myself. Woo! See? It's kicking everything in my direction. See, I'd rather use, obviously, the downside of the wheel rather than the upside of the wheel. Plus, too, if it flings something in my face, it'll fling it down onto the table, not straight into my eyeball, which would not be good. Say, how did you injure yourself, sir, at the emergency room? And I'd say, oh, a little plastic tiki god went like an arrow into my eyeball. But these are the things that happen. Things can happen. All right, done with this batch. Okay, it's time to drill some holes. And the reason we're going to drill some holes is we got to put a cord through the head so it turns it into a necklace. Makes perfect sense, right? All right, that's what we're doing. So, we're at the drill press. Put the cord away. Time for le drillage. That's an old French term for drilling. No, it isn't. I just made that up. I made this handy dandy drilling jig to make the thing go quick and easy. Now, there are reference holes cast into the piece, so I could drill them by hand from each side, which is kind of the old-fashioned slow way to do it. But a jig is way faster and way easier, and it's deadly accurate. So it's definitely the way to go. Easy peasy.
I hit the slow-mo button on my phone by accident. It's right next to the video button, and I've been known to do that before. But in this case, I like the effect so much I had to add it to the video. I just love watching those chips spin around the shaft of that drill bit. They just look really cool. They're almost like a ballet performance. Having my fingers so close to cutting tools is how I got that boo-boo on my thumb in the first place. But apparently I am incapable of learning.
The reason I'm wearing the crappiest clothing that I own is that today we're going to stain our happy little kids. And in order to do that, we're going to use the vacuum pump. Basically, what I have done is I have lowered a 5-gallon bucket of stain into the vacuum chamber, and inside the 5-gallon bucket of stain is a strainer basket. Looks like I'm making fried shrimp, but I'm not. Why are we doing all this, you ask? Because when you apply stain to these pieces, there's a lot of really fine details, cracks, crevices, wood grain, all that stuff. And what we have learned over the years is when you brush the stain on, you get a lot of areas where you get just lots of pinpoint areas where the stain just doesn't go down into the pores of the details. So in order to make it go down into the pores of the details, we use a vacuum chamber. We, in effect, suck all the air out of those pores, and the stain completely coats it. So when they come out of this chamber, they are fully stained. We still have to brush off the excess and do all kinds of stuff. You'll see that happen. But this machine is the key to making really, really beautiful stain jobs on these plastic parts. With the shrimp basket inside of the bucket, we can now add the tikis. I'm going to do them about, I'm thinking 30 at a time. So 3,
6, 8, 10, 13, 18, 20, 25, 30.
Okay, they're in there. Now, we turn on the vacuum. Okay, I put the lid on the vacuum chamber and lit it so that you could look down inside. The air is being pulled out of the stain. Look at that. It's going. Woo! Now that's pulling all the air out of all those parts. Having degassed the castings, we can let the air out of the tank. Very nice. That was not difficult. And take the bucket out. Oh, it's always fun to lift a 5-gallon bucket by your fingertips. But now, to behold the genius of my system, and can you just stop for a moment and admire this high-tech bracket system? So what we're going to do is going to lift these kids and let it drip. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is put on my food handler gloves. Still might be a good idea for me to roll up the old sleeves, put on my food handler gloves because I'm about to make a mess. And we're going to need our brushes handy, which are all ready to go. And we're going to need our rags handy, which are all ready to go. All right, let us go to work. Grab out the first bunch. Grab out 6 or 8, or however many a handful is. Very good. Pop those back in the bucket so they can sit in the sauce and think about their sins. Think about the dissolution of their lives. And while I contemplate the joys of production art making. Okay. So now the first step is, I got 2 first steps. One is blow, and that blows all the air out of the little string hole. Then blot. So I've named this the blow and blot step. Blow and blot. You can see I'm making a nice mess by blowing this stain all over the place, but that's the best way I have found to get the stain out of the string hole. So now, the blotting doesn't give us a nice finish, but what does give us a nice finish is the brush. Brushing does a good job. So we're going to brush each and every one of them to make sure that the stain is nice and even. And then just put them aside, put each one aside. This isn't the final brushing. What happens is that you brush them and then you get most of this pooled stain off them. You keep blotting the brush. You get most of the stain off them, but then you got to chuck them one more time. You may have to do it a few times to get the right, nice, even stain finish on them. But they come out pretty nice, gotta say it. They come out pretty nice. Okay, we will let those think about their sins. And let's get the next bunch. I put on a fan because anything that makes the process go faster is a good thing. And the moving air definitely helps speed the drying of the stain. These pieces are stained and looking good. They're all nice and dry. And they are ready to go on to the next step. So we have 200 pieces stained and ready to go. All right, gotta make some strings. And that means I have to cut 200 strings to length. And that's not fun to do. They have to be all the same length. So I made this handy dandy, very high-tech jig. Are you ready? Here we go. 1, 2. I just need to count out to 20. 7,
8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20.
beautiful. I have found that 20 is a good number because I only need to make 10 bundles of these, and I've already made a bunch of them. And they're easy to keep track of and easy to count. And that's why I do it. Okay, on to the next step. After you count them, you've got to cut them. And that is easily done. All right, let's tie some strings. So we just pass the string through the hole like that. Beautiful. Then we're just going to make a little knot at one end. Now the whole trick to this is we're making a slip knot. And the reason for the slip knot is we want the necklace to be adjustable for the length of the wearer. So it can hang down pretty far or it can hang up pretty close like a choker. So you make one knot on one side like that. Then you come around and you make the knot on the other side. Pull them tight, and you're done. That's all there is to it. And how long the necklace is depends on how far apart the knots are. So if you pull them close together like that, it's pretty long. If you pull them further apart, you can practically make a choker. Oh my God, it's like, who invents these genius things? No, it wasn't me. Somebody else did, and they just put me to work tying them. All right. These are the last two tikis to string, and the job is done. Here's the thing, this is actually tiki number 203 that I'm holding in my hands. So we actually we're commissioned to make 200 of them, but we actually made 204, not counting the ones that we had to reject along the way. There were some of those, but not very many. Surprisingly, not too many of those. But we made 204 because you never know. First of all, we might have counted wrong and accidentally shorted the client. Second of all, the client might open the box and find one or two of them broken, or take them out of the box and drop them themselves. Life happens, and we have found over the years that it's far better to make a few extra of something than it is to make the exact number and then find yourself coming up short. It's a really simple little rule that we use, and that is under promise and over deliver. And that makes for happy clients instead of tearful, angry, sad phone calls and other misery and other sadness. All right, it's the end of this job.
Hukilau.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. See you next time.